Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the November 1st meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission, called to order at 7:03 p.m. Can the recording secretary please conduct roll?
Commissioner Kuznick,
Here.
Commissioner Marks,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Edwards,
Here.
Chair Albert.
And I'm here. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Item 4 is public comments or written communications. At this time, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any item not already on tonight's agenda. If you'd like to speak, please fill out a green speaker card located in the back of the room and submit it to the recording secretary. If you are participating remotely, you may click the raise your hand button on your computer or *9 on your telephone to request to speak when public comment is being taken. Recording secretary, are there any late communications or speaker cards for tonight?
We had 3 late communication items received from Susan Ferris Intercom, Diana Corpy, and Jim Blickenstaff, and are part of the public record and were provided to the commission prior to the meeting. We do have speaker cards as well as hands raised.
Okay, why don't we do the speaker cards first? And how many cards do we have?
Just one.
Okay, thank you.
Dawn Ruth,
Good evening. My name is Don Ruth. I'm a 42-year resident of San Ramon. My comments tonight are regarding the proposed development at Marketplace. We are all aware of the staff's callous disregard for the Planning Commission's instructions at the October 4th meeting. It was clear to anyone that was there or saw the video that the Planning Commission wanted to advise TRC of deficiencies in their application prior to the 30-day window closing. Staff knows full well that this is a controversial project and that the community is against it. So if they had any doubt about the commission's direction, they should have checked with the commission before sending the letter. Also, let's not forget that at the same meeting, the commission requested that both the staff and the applicant respond to each of the points in the Green Fire letter of October 4th. But what did the city attorney's office do? They usurped the authority of the Planning Commission by sending a letter listing the deficiencies, but explicitly and unilaterally undermine the entire purpose of the letter by providing assurance to TRC that no objective requirements were violated. This was a direct contradiction of staff's commitment to the commission. Staff also unilaterally decided that it wasn't necessary for them or the applicant to respond to the Green Fire letter. And when the assistant attorney was admonished by the commission at the October 18th meeting, she was argumentative and indifferent to the significance of her actions. What in the world is going on here? You all might as well pack up your bags and go home because the city attorney's office is making all the decisions. How arrogant is the city attorney's office that the Green Fire attorneys have no idea what they're talking about and that the citizens of San Ramon don't even deserve a written response to our concerns. As I told the city council last week, you need to fix this. I don't know how, but you need to fix this. Otherwise, no one is representing the concerns of the citizens of San Ramon. The city received over 1,000 letters and emails against a housing development on this site and supporting a retail location for a full-service grocery store. When was the last time you got over 1,000 emails on one project? There are only a handful of people that are in favor of this project, and most of them live in Southern California and work for TRC. Camp Ed has spent 21 months communicating with thousands of San Ramon residents. We got advice from 4 former mayors. We took classes to understand the rules and the process. We hired attorneys, good attorneys, and we met with staff. We were told to trust the process, that we would have the opportunity to get answers once the formal application process started. So much for trusting the process. What is really ironic to me is that the city has a general plan. The general plan provides for a master plan. You are the planning commission, yet there is no plan for the marketplace. And don't tell me that your hands are tied by the state. You know and I know that this is an ill-advised project. Adhere to your general plan and your zoning ordinance, including the definition of mixed use and the requirement for a master plan. And do something to fix what the city attorney's office screwed up. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any more speaker cards?
No more speaker cards.
Okay, and we do have hands raised, you said. How many hands do we have in the audience tonight?
We currently have 7 speakers in the audience.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and leave it at 3 minutes and then we'll go ahead and take the first one, please.
Tom,
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Tom Perrell. I'm a 30-year resident and homeowner in San Ramon. And I want to start my few comments here just saying I don't know anything about city planning, absolutely nothing. But it does seem obvious to me by some of the meetings that I've attended, at least online, that there's lots of red flags waving. It seems like somebody's manipulating density numbers. That seems pretty objective to me. And it looks like another red flag is you're talking about mixed use and it only incorporates one commercial property. I mean, it seems a bit odd to me. And then the red flag about how it aligns with the city's master plan. No one really was able to make me feel comfortable that there was any kind of alignment. Anyway, like I'm saying, I don't know anything about city planning. I feel fortunate that we have you guys and ladies as capable leaders on the Planning Commission. And I'm hoping that your combined wisdom will come to realize that we need to work with TRC to concretize any kind of master plan they have for their properties. Otherwise, we don't know where we're going or how we're going to get there. And as part of that master plan, the master plan needs to include a full service supermarket. I know, speaking for myself, and I believe thousands, and not that I believe, I know all of the neighbors I've spoken to, it's caused a hardship not having that supermarket there. Also, the 40 units being proposed by TRC, no one has told me yet how that benefits this city. It seems to just benefit TRC. I would really like TRC to tell us how it benefits the city. Anyway, I want to thank you for recognizing me, and those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you.
Greg Carr,
Yes, Greg Carr. Can you hear me?
We sure can, Greg.
Yes, Greg Carr, San Ramon resident. I'm speaking tonight on 2 things. One is a short one. First one is to follow up and thank Don Ruth for coming down and speaking again to a process issue that took place on the 18th. That is of grave concern to any of us who were there. And you all heard me, except Gene Kuznick, luckily wasn't there to hear me yelling. But it's important to have us clear that up and get to the bottom of that for the benefit of the city's process and the city residents. Second one, another potential faux pas. There's a planned installation of a 5G antenna to be placed by Verizon on West Side Drive near San Ramon Valley Boulevard. Okay, let that sink in. That is very concerning to me. I've been after this for several years now. Here's some facts real quick. No notice was received by the El Nido property owner. He only learned of it after walking by the street light for the planned installation site and seeing a piece of paper taped to it. Okay, second point, and this sink in, Verizon is going to put a 5G antenna next to the property line of a care facility, okay, with aged people, my age and up. Thirdly, planning staff accepted this location that was in the siting application. Then it goes to the city manager, who is appointed by this city council to administratively review and pass judgment on these things, and he approves it. Here are the problems. Okay, the first one is that having no notice violates the 300-foot notification radius. And then a question is, are the people that own homes across the street, were they notified of this? Second one is, it's located in a residential street where it's technically prohibited. It's at the tail end of places where, such installations can be installed. Then it's located in front of a care facility. And then the address on the city's notice was incorrect. So I'm asking you, as the representatives of the city council and the citizens, to talk with the city council about this and get that city manager decision rescinded and have that antenna moved to an acceptable location. And my time is up. Thank you, folks. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Greg.
Michelle Pelkey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. My name is Michelle, and my parents bought their house in 1967 in San Ramon. I was raised in San Ramon, and I grew up here, and I've seen a lot of change. I remember when the train went through here, which is now Iron Horse Trail. I grew up with our nearest grocery store being Alpha Beta, and that was torn down to become housing. Now, after that, we were given beautiful Marketplace, which we had Nob Hill to go to as a grocery store. Now, what's being done? Proposing that to be torn down to be housing. I don't understand why this is a continuous process. So what's next? Safeway on Crow Canyon or Bollinger? Which one is it going to be? Which one is going to turn into housing next? Don't say it can't happen, because I've seen it happen twice. It's a roll of the dice. Something needs to stop, and we need to stop it at Marketplace. And the other thing here too is the Moran family was under the impression that Nob Hill was staying as a grocery store with their city walk. And they understood that it was going to be a very convenient location for their citizens, their residents, to go full grocery store and shop. And now that's not there, a full size grocery store. So now that's taken away with the additional other thousands of residents that have always needed that location. So it's a need, and it needs to stay. The building is already there. Let's get another vendor in there, a full-size grocery store. I went to Trader Joe's today, and I've asked the council to do this before. When was the last time you went there? The parking lot was more than half full. When was the last time you visited the Marketplace with nearly, I don't know what the occupancy rate right now is, but it's very busy. And I would like for you to go down there and see that. And then my last message really quickly is, it was very disappointing to see the city attorney with what had happened. And I truly hope that some sort of something will be brought, and I don't know, some sort of appropriate action will be taken with her in that, because the ill representation and the guidance that she gave, well, the non-guidance that she gave you was just it speechless. I don't even know what to say. She misrepresented San Ramon as a city, the residents, and the city council, and that should absolutely never, ever happen again. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Call-in user 1.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to say that I'm very disappointed that the city council didn't seem to care about everything that my predecessors have just expressed over and over and over. Why do I say that? Because in the last city council meeting, there was a closed session to evaluate our city attorney. And when they came out to brief the public, it appeared that they rewarded the city attorney. Granted, Mr. License wasn't Ms. Poon, who was the one who made the mistake. However, I don't think Mr. Martin can be completely, can get away with this and be scot-free because after all, he is the city attorney. And so he is above the assistant city attorney, which is Ms. Poon. So I really doubt that he was completely ignorant about her actions. And if he was ignorant, the discipline should be coming from him. At least, an admonishment of some sort would put off the fire that we are all feeling because it represents disrespect from you. Well, not so much you guys, but from the city council, from the city attorney, from everyone, really. It's like we don't exist. What are we, trees to you? Then please don't tax us. If you're going to treat us like objects and not feeling humans, and you just want to ignore our needs, then don't tax us. Otherwise, please pay attention to over 1,000 emails sent to you in protest of this project, and all these gentlemen and ladies who came to your meetings when they have better things to do at night. Please acknowledge our collective anger about how you have disrespected us and treated us, and most importantly, Ms. Poon have violated her ethics, and honestly, she made a huge mistake that put our city in a very disadvantageous position that affects a lot of people's quality of life, and that needs to be addressed. And I would hold the recently awarded Mr. License, to make sure he follows through with the discipline, and at least acknowledgement of our collective fury to make sure that he does deserve the recent increase that our city council has given him. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Susan Ferris Inderkum.
Thank you. Good evening, council members and Gary Albert, chairperson. My original letter to you was sent in plenty of time, and you did get that. The subsequent late email was that I realized during a cut and paste, I had dropped a paragraph, and it was an important paragraph. So I'm just going to read the first two of importance, and then I would like to read the new paragraph so that it's on the record. The first paragraph, I'm writing to urge you to censure Miss Alicia Poon, Assistant City Attorney, for her appalling lack of professionalism and refusal to carry out the duties of a city attorney assigned to support you. Those duties are to provide members of the governing bodies representing the city with the best, most current legal advice and counsel. Miss Poon did none of those, and in fact, she misled you and her boss, Martin License, with her cavalier interpretation of the law under SB 330 and HAA. Her repugnant dismissal of letters that were submitted to you by our attorney, R.L. Strauss, with Greenfire Law, who is representing Camp Ad. I have already urged the city manager and the city council to seek her termination, as this city cannot function properly or in the best interests of the public at large with such willful deceit and laziness. Ms. Poon should have come to the October 4th 2022 Planning Commission fully prepared to respond to Greenfire's objections to TRC's deficient application. She did not. And when pressed by Commissioner Marks to prepare a written response to that letter, she flippantly suggested that it was not necessary since it was just another lawyer's opinion. This is the new paragraph. Further, she failed to do her job and advise you of the proper and necessary requirements to formally record the commission's vote taken on the deficiency letter. This led to her boss being told that no action was taken when clearly you intended to take action, and later clearly thought you had. You and the city cannot afford to retain this form of obfuscation and incompetence on the payroll. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Caller user.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. My name is Ariel Strauss. I'm an attorney with Greenfire Law, representing Citizens Against Marketplace Apartment/Condominium Development, CAMPAD, calling to comment regarding the letter staff issued to TRC Retail on October 17th pertaining to the 130 Marketplace project application. As we discussed last meeting, the letter that staff issued at TRC deviated shockingly from the direction that the Commission issued to staff on October 4th in the hearing in the presence of TRC. Public record request we submitted disclosed on the morning of October 7th, the zoning staff scheduled a meeting with TRC and their attorneys and also city attorney for Monday, October 10th, the same day Commissioner Wallace sent Mr. Barr a memo detailing deficiencies that should be included in the letter. On October 13th, a TRC representative followed up with zoning staff to inquire on the status of, quote, a consistency/conformance letter, end quote. This may simply be an optimistic euphemism, or it may mean that TRC had advance notice the letter would paradoxically clear the project. It appears that the staff meeting with TRC coincided with staff dramatically departing from the commitment they undertook on October 4th and issuing an unauthorized, quote, conformance letter in place of deficiency letter. Staff, on the other hand, did not provide the Commission a copy of this deviant letter until it was requested and only after the Housing Accountability Act deadline has passed. Under the Act, it is the local agency, for which a commission, not staff, speaks, that is authorized to determine whether an application is consistent or inconsistent. If TRC and their attorneys convince staff to issue a letter knowingly deviating from the determination of the commission, it would be appropriate to disregard these changes and consider that TRC had unclean hands in this orchestration, and the commission retained this authority under the Act to deny the application on the basis stated in the body of the letter, which in fact does list several objective deficiencies with the application. CAMPAD encourages the Commission to inquire with staff why they scheduled a meeting with TRC on the 7th, the agenda for that meeting that occurred on the 10th, whether the draft letter was discussed at that meeting, what conclusions or other action was taken in response to the meeting, and why TRC would have had the impression on October 13th that the letter would be, quote, a conformance letter. Answering these questions is critical to the Commission carrying out its oversight role it is charged to perform. Furthermore, the Commission must obtain clarity and avenues further available to the Commission in the event that they determine that the letter has in fact limited their authority, specifically the nature and scope of the type of conditions that can still be imposed on the project, and accordingly schedule the coming hearings with adequate time to fully explore those conditions so that the Commission can condition the project so that it complies with law to the greatest extent possible. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I look forward to seeing the Commission's action and continuing to participate in the coming hearings.
Thank you. Do we have any additional cards?
We still have 4 hands raised in the audience.
Okay.
Jim Blickenstaff.
Hello, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Jim.
Oh, good. Okay. Let me start. Okay. Basically, it has to do with Marketplace. I just want to make some thoughts pretty clear from my point of view. I ask that the Planning Commission take action to strongly clarify the role of the Planning Commission and the role of staff as a subordinate to the Planning Commission and the City Council, and also take steps to make clear the position of the Commission as it relates to the content and message of a recently sent non-compliance letter required by SB 330. This can be sent to TRC and be independent of various opinions as to how it relates to SB 330. It needs to be part of the record for purposes of avoiding any future confusion from an entity that may see the current implied status of planning staff as a final authority for these decisions by the legislative body, in this case, the Planning Commission. It will also be an important part of the historic record. A disturbing thing for me is the city staff, including the city attorney's office, interjected themselves into the planning process for the apparent outcome, hopeful outcome for them, I suppose, of helping a developer in the process of development destroy an opportunity for a viable grocery retail center, while at the same time encouraging a process leading to the piecemeal housing development of the marketplace site with its historic value for a grocery retail center. This undermines the long-range planning in the best interests of the city and the surrounding community. That needs to be rectified. We can do better. We have to do better. It needs to start here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Next speaker.
Diana Corpy.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. First of all, I'd like to state that every time I submit something to the city clerk, it shows up that I've had a late submission of comments, which I've always done in a timely fashion. So I'd like just to make that of record. I wrote to you today, and I'm calling in because of my concerns of the misconduct of staff, which several others have talked about this evening. I'm appalled that the city assistant attorney and Mr. Barr made unilateral decisions separate from the request of the Planning Commission. It's clearly documented on the two videos from the two previous meetings what the intent was of the Planning Commission. Greenfire law has been retained by CampAd, which I am a founding member and also a founding member of Responsible Growth Saremont, and I'm also a member of the Open Space Advisory Committee. The flippant attitude that Ms. Poon has had towards Commissioner Marks' questions was in such a fashion that for her to brush it off as opinion was just questionable as to, first of all, is her ability to do her job. And she's hired by the city for direction. And we're paying her. And who pays her salary? We do, the citizens that live here. I'm very concerned based on the incompetent actions from our attorney, our city staff, that you are actually getting what is happening behind the scenes. And I'm hoping that you have read Greenfire's letter and the two attachments which detail conversations between TRC and Mr. Barr prior to the issuing of the letter, which was not approved by the Planning Commission, back to TRC. So I don't know if there's some collusion going on here, but we've got to fix this because we have got to move forward in an intelligent fashion to protect the integrity of our retail for our community. We've talked about the general plan, the master plan, and mixed use, and that's all in my paperwork that I submitted tonight. So I'm not going to beleaguer those items. But I wanted to call to express my opinion, and thank you for your time.
Next speaker.
Nicole.
Nicole,
Can
are
you hear
there?
me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry, I had to switch my computers here. My other one wasn't working. First, I'd like to thank you for the brief time here to make a statement. I am one of the residents. I've lived here over 40 years. I grew up in San Ramon. Of the time that I have lived in San Ramon, it's been over 40 years. That said, I have not sent in a letter. I have not made comments. I have not done a lot to help this project, but I'm very opposed to it. So I am speaking from the voices of those who have been silent. I'm grateful for those who have started CampPad and started up. So if you consider on Nextdoor over 700 people on that site, over 1,000 emails you're getting, multiply that by 10, 20 of the rest of us that aren't saying anything. Marketplace is one of those little community stores, market areas that has gone downhill. I do believe what people have said, that the property owners have done it on purpose. People have left, stores have left and closed. We had a great grocery store there. It's in walking distance for a lot of people without having to cross a very large, busy street now that has become dangerous. With all that said, not only was the initial comment to build something that's 4 to 5 stories high, which was appalling, I still find it appalling that they're even looking at 3 stories for 40 units, 40 families who are going to be an inconvenience to a lot of people, as opposed to what the marketplace is within walking distance. Not only that, I don't live right down there, but if I lived at Reflections or right across the way at Canyon Woods, I'd be pretty mad that their city is allowing something that's higher than my buildings to go in, which takes away from my views, takes away from skylines and sunsets and part of our beautiful city. With that, they also don't have adequate parking. And Bishop Ranch is building over 4,500 units. There is enough housing going in and around San Ramon that I too would disagree that this is an appropriate area for housing. It should remain as commercial property. And if the current landlord can't keep it up, maybe they should look to sell it and find somebody that can manage it properly. Those are my comments, and I appreciate all of those who have put in the time and effort to fight this project. Like I said, I've been against it from the start, but I don't have the time and energy to commit to the fight. I would hope that the city planners do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Bridges.
Hello. Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for allowing me the time here to speak. I am a member of the CampPad group. My name is Dan Bridges, been here for over 20 years. I've watched this whole process unfold since it started on the deliberations around this development at the marketplace. And I must say that I'm very appalled at the level of dysfunction on display for the community to see from the city staff that's occurred. You know, a simple letter that captured the concerns of the Planning Commission about the proposed development at the marketplace couldn't be written as requested by the Planning Commission and sent to TRC to meet 30-day response requirements that allows the concerns of the residents of San Ramon to be considered fairly. Our rights as concerned citizens have just been trampled upon. This is a democracy after all, right? We have a chance to speak up about things. And that's what we've been trying to do all this time. And we really haven't been fully heard. So I would like to know what is going to be done about what happened to ensure that it can't happen in the future. And why not demand that a grocery store be included in TRC's plan for development? Why not require a comprehensive general plan for the entire property around the marketplace that we've talked about? Why not respond to the concerns of the large number of people that want to have that retail space preserved? You have received the communications, as has been stated previously here, of over 1,000 people about this issue with great concerns about the change that's proposed. So you have also received a great amount of very strong input from Green Fire Law that you have ignored. A response is needed. And it's time to do something positive for the community that you serve with regard to this issue, in my opinion. And I also would just like to agree with the comments that were made by the previous speakers that are a part of the same group that I am. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Phone in user.
Kristen. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I live in this community of San Ramon, and I very much support the Camp Ad campaign. I also have not spoken up until this evening. Excuse me, but I very much oppose the idea of building this monstrosity in the marketplace. There's plenty of housing in San Ramon. You guys keep offering and allowing more things to be built and built and built, yet there is no grocery store. Trader Joe's is not considered a full service grocery store. Safeway, Albertsons, those kinds of things, those are full service grocery stores. Trader Joe's does not fit that bill. Trader Joe's cannot service all of the surrounding community that lives around the marketplace. Let's see, the school district occasionally talks about allowing busing systems to cut down on traffic congestion and car emissions and all those types of things. And now you want us to trek all around the community to go to a grocery store because there is not one close enough to us. That marketplace grocery store serviced many, many, many households in San Ramon. I guess that maybe you want us to drive down the road to Dublin and go to Walmart grocery store there in Dublin, or you want us to go all the way up the hill and fight with all the citizens of Gale Ranch and go to that Safeway. That Safeway is very small, even for the needs of the community of Gale Ranch. Or perhaps you want us to trek all the way over and across the freeway to the other Safeway, which is what we currently do, which again causes lots of emissions, lots of traffic that is unnecessary. I would much rather stay on this side of the freeway and do my grocery shopping than trek all around the neighborhood just to go get a few, a gallon of milk or a few things that I need. Trader Joe's just does not suffice. I really wish that you guys would reconsider and not allow this to happen because it is quite unnecessary. Those are my thoughts. And excuse me, I'm sure that many San Ramon residents share the same thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
There are no more speakers.
Okay. Why don't we go ahead and close public comment? Thank you all for sharing your comments. Due to state law, we cannot respond, but city staff has heard and will respond as appropriate. Item 5, additions and revisions to the agenda. We have none. Item 6, consent calendar. We have none. Item 7, approval of minutes. 7.1, Planning Commission regular meeting of October 4th, 2022. Call your attention that there was a typo under the staff liaison reports that has been addressed from Commissioner Kuznick attending the Housing Advisory Committee meeting, and the minutes have also been amended as proposed by the Planning Commission at our last meeting under item 10.1. Are there any comments or questions on the revised minutes? Seeing none, if I could get a motion to approve 10.1. And if you're prepared, we can either do you are prepared. Awesome. So we have a motion to approve 10.1 or the October 4th minutes. Commissioner Wallace moved, seconded. Commissioner Kuznick. Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Wallace, seconded by Commissioner Kuznick. Vote. Okay, approval of the October 4th minutes passes 5-0. What's that? I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. 4-0-1 with Commissioner Edwards abstaining because she was not at that meeting. Thank you. Okay. Now we'll take a look at the minutes from the October 18th meeting. Okay, the October 18th meeting, it's been, we changed the new vote up on the screen. Yeah, okay. We're waiting for the electronic voting on the minutes from the October 18th meeting. Okay, it's ready for a mover.
Before we hit the moving button, would you like some comments?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Okay, yes, we do want comments.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't see.
That's okay.
For the record, there are 2 late communication items received from Susan Ferris Indercom and Ariel Strauss of Greenfire Law and are part of the public record and were provided to the commission prior to the meeting. And we also have hands in the audience.
Well, I will guess I will hold my comments until after
Commissioner
public
Russell,
comment.
okay, I will confirm that we do have paper copies of the late communications from both Susan Ferris Intercom as well as Greenfire Law. So we have all seen those. Why don't we go ahead and open the public comment? We have no speaker cards, I'm assuming.
No speaker cards.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and take the people online?
Phone in user.
Phone in user, are you with us?
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. This is Ariel Strauss of the Greenfire Law representing CAMPAD. I had actually indicated on my phone raising my hand to speak before the voting on the October 4th hearing minute. I am calling to reflect on the letter that I'd submitted last night and the language that I'd proposed to be added to the October 4th meeting minutes, clarifying that the Commission identified potential consistencies with objective standards to preserve its authority under the Housing Accountability Act, and that the Commission did not authorize staff to tell the applicant that there are no identified inconsistencies with objective standards or criteria. At this point, it cannot be known how the Commission will choose to respond to TRC's application or the material would receive from TRC on November 11th. And setting forth the Commission's intention direction will set a correct record of the actual fair notice received by the applicant on October 4th. And this record will provide most potential leeway for the Commission to act on this application. I do request that the matter be reconsidered tonight and that those additional terms be clarified in the minutes for the October 4th hearing. Thank you.
Steve Cohen.
I'm sorry, I wanted to comment on the marketplace in CAMPAD. I had my hand raised. I wasn't called on, but I think that everyone has said basically what I wanted to reiterate. So why don't you carry on with the meeting?
Thank you. Okay.
Ariel Strauss.
He just spoke. He actually just spoke.
No more hands at this time.
Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment on the minutes from October the 18th. There was a question on the October 4th. The direction that we gave the staff last meeting was captured, and we did take a vote. So unless I'm looking at the commissioners, especially Commissioner Wallace, I think we're okay to move on, and you want to comment on October 18th minutes?
That's correct.
So,
Okay.
Chair, just to follow up on the October 4th minutes, that the letters, the late communication that we received in referenced in the caller, it is part of the public record. Because okay, so I just wanted to clarify and let people know that we have that. It is part of the formal record that this particular firm's concern on the language of
Right.
our meeting. Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Kuznick. And just to also emphasize that the minutes are summary minutes, and the official record is the video and the recording, as well as all of the written communications we received. So I think we're okay to move on. Commissioner Wallace, you had some comments on the October 18th minutes.
I do. It's been said that brevity is the soul of wit. But I think that the terseness of the discussion on October 18 concerning the minutes of October 4th leaves a lot out of the public record. Most of the meeting on the 18th concerned what happened on October 4th and the letter that went out on October 17th which the commission became aware of for the first time shortly before the meeting of the 18th. So I think in the fairness of having a more complete public record in the minutes, I would propose to strike what has been proposed, starting with Commissioner Wallace's motion, and to insert the following. I'm going to read this slowly. I do have a hard copy in case what I say is not clear. And my proposal is to replace the existing minutes as follows. Quote, a spirited discussion took place concerning the October 17, 2022 letter from staff to the applicant for the proposed marketplace development project that was received by commissioners shortly before the October 18, 2022 Planning Commission meeting, stating that there were no identified inconsistencies with objective standards or criteria regarding the project, period. Several commissioners expressed the view that the letter was the opposite of what the Planning Commission directed staff to do during the October 4, 2022 meeting, and that staff did not have the authority to determine on its own whether the project was consistent with the city's objective standards, period. Commissioner Wallace proposed language to modify the proposed October 4 meeting minutes, but after it was noted that Commissioner Edwards was not present at the October 4 hearing, and that Commissioner Kuznick, who had been at the October 4 hearing, was not present, Commissioner Wallace moved to amend the minutes with the recommended language and continue the hearing on the October 4 meeting minutes to the next meeting, period. The motion was seconded by Commissioner Marks and approved 3-0-1, period. End of excerpt. That's what I'd propose to put in the place of the existing proposed minutes from the October 18 meeting on item number 7.1.
It's been moved. We can have a second and then a discussion where we vote.
I'm sorry, so
So
I wanted to just
we're going to
understand.
discuss it, but we can do a motion in a second. And then
Okay,
before we
so
vote,
this
we
is a
can-
motion to amend the minutes.
the minutes.
Okay, this is a different motion than a motion to approve the minutes.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Right. Okay. Comments on the proposed language. Commissioner Edwards.
So I am not in favor of the addition of all of that language. I am not in favor of the use of the term spirited for the discussion. And
from my perspective, it's not accurate to say that the commissioners received the letter in advance of the October 18th hearing. I did not receive it until after our last meeting.
Okay. Other comments? The word spirited, caught my ear as well. I also felt there was a comment in there, and maybe I hate to make you do this again, but about midway through around the comment on staff having the authority. Could you read that part of the?
Yeah, yes, I think what you're referring to is let me read this in context. Quote, several commissioners expressed the view that the letter was the opposite of what the Planning Commission directed staff to do during the October 4, 2022 meeting, and that staff did not have the authority to determine on its own whether the project was consistent with the city's objective standards, period, close quote.
Okay. I missed the on its own. I'm not sure I agree with the opposite of. There was a lot in the letter that was consistent, but it's completely opposite. That I don't feel that's quite accurate. I think part of it is accurate, but not the entire thing. Commissioner Marks, looks like you're ready to weigh in.
Well, I was going to address the comment that Commissioner Wallace has in his letter, and that Commissioner Edwards responded to. Instead of saying that we received the letter prior to the 18th, or whatever the wording was, maybe we could amend that to simply say that we received the letter. We did not receive the letter in a timely manner. And I wonder if that would address Corey's concern.
I want to be very judicious about the record that we're making. The record that was made on the 18th was certainly spirited. It was certainly animated. That record is out there. I am reluctant to use the minutes of our planning commission meetings to comment on and provide commentary on things that we think happened at our meeting. I appreciate that there's, I'll use the word dissatisfaction with the letter that went out. But I am reluctant to use our meeting minutes as a way to express our dissatisfaction. I feel like the meeting minutes need to simply be factual records of what did and did not occur at our meetings. And I think that the statement that there was a discussion, that you had made the motion, and that Commissioner Marks seconded the motion, and then there was a vote, that is an accurate factual statement of what happened at the meeting. Others may disagree. That's my view.
Okay, before us.
Would you? Yeah. Okay. Well, Commissioner Edwards apparently agrees with me that it was a spirited discussion. That's one way to describe it. But if Commissioner Edwards feels more comfortable taking out the word spirited, I'm okay with that. With respect to the rest of it, I think it's important to place on the record that the Planning Commission stated at the public hearing that the letter that went out, and by the way, I was told that the letter went to all the commissioners at the same time it went to me, which is why I said it was before the meeting. But I think it's important for the public record that the minutes state, as several commissioners did, and I can count them right here, that the letter that went out did not reflect what the commission directed at the October 4th meeting. And I can vouch that it was expressly stated by at least two of us, and I think three, that in the commission's view, that the staff writing the letter in that fashion exceeded their authority. Now, I will tell you, this is going to come up again. And I think it's important to have it on the public record that we raised it when we first became aware of the situation. So while I am agreeable to taking out the word spirited, I am opposed to taking out the rest of that section because I think it accurately reflects an important statement that the Planning Commission made at that meeting. And to the extent this ever comes up in front of the City Council, believe that this should be part of the public record and not relegate the City Council to looking at the videotape of our proceeding. So I'm sorry, Commissioner Marks reached for his mic, so I'm going to wait.
Well, we do not have a motion before us at the moment on the adoption of the change. Mr. Chairman, is it appropriate to come forward with a motion?
Unless there's other comments or discussion, I think that's probably the best. Other additional comments, discussion? Commissioner Kuznick, you did not attend, but you watched the videotape, so you are eligible to comment.
Yes, I was able to follow the meeting on YouTube while I was physically not here, but I was aware, very much following the spirited discussion on this topic. And I do think that it somewhere between what Commissioner Wallace has suggested and what is provided in our amended or second version of the minutes is probably the sweet spot, and to wordsmith at this. However, it's not my strong suit to wordsmith on the fly here to offer recommendations, so that I think it is reasonable to add to the summary, some summarizing minutes, that the commission was rightfully, maybe that's a subjective term, but I will stick with it, rightfully concerned that the direction that we were asked to give staff was not the direction that we learned of, and that resulted in a very strong discussion of how that was enacted.
Commissioner Edwards, did I understand you correctly that you are okay with the minutes as currently written and would prefer not to see them changed? Is that
That's correct.
okay?
However, I'm not opposed to considering an amendment.
Right. Okay. Like
I'm going to add a little bit more here. Sorry. Just take a little longer here. I do think that in the minutes, what is lacking, I think, as I reread it more carefully and compare it to Commissioner Wallace's comments, is that the minutes do not seem to reflect the discrepancy in the letter that we became aware of in the updated version of the minutes. And I do think I would agree with Commissioner Wallace that that is important to have into the record. It states that we directed the zoning administrator to issue the applicant a letter, but then it does not, the minutes do not reflect our very strong, our authentic and I think true concerns that the letter that was issued did not reflect what we thought we were directing staff to do.
Let me ask you a question. I'm sorry. Are you referencing the October 4th minutes or the October 18th minutes?
The one that's in tonight's agenda packet of the October 18th minutes, I believe. Okay, maybe, hold on. I could be wrong.
Okay. So we are discussing the October 18th
I am.
minutes. Yeah. Okay. We already approved the 4th. Okay, so. And not like others, I don't feel like it's appropriate to wordsmith or rewrite on the fly. And I feel like some of the comments in there, the gist of spirited discussion, yes. That the letter that was sent was not received in advance, similar to what Mr. Mark said. Third, that the letter did not reflect what the commission thought they had, agreed to on October the 4th. I think are those the three salient points? If you take away opinion or conclusions, are those the three salient points that you had, Commissioner Wallace?
Okay, so I apologize. It's a little hard to follow the train of thought here. Wordsmithing on the fly is not something I do.
That's why I'm
greatly.
not trying to write
But
sentences.
I
just
have a suggestion.
Okay.
Okay. So I hope someone's writing this down. The first part of really, it seems that the concern seems to be the second paragraph, second sentence in the minutes that I've written that starts out several commissioners. And since we have now approved the October 4 minutes, my suggestion would be something along this line. Several commissioners expressed the view that the letter did not accurately convey the concerns of the Planning Commission that are set forth in the minutes of the October 4 meeting, comma, and that staff did not have the authority to determine on its own whether the project was consistent with the city's objective standards, period, close quote. And I suggest modifying the first clause of my missive, because since we now have agreed what was said at the October 4 meeting, that we can simply use that as the statement of what we said at the October 18 meeting.
It's close in my mind. It's to be okay. I think the clause that said staff, that's a conclusion. Staff on its own did not have the authority. That feels like that's a conclusion,
Well,
which is to be determined, I think, but
oh, okay. As an abstract statement, you're correct. It's inclusion, but the way it's used in the proposed minutes and the way it was intended was this was not a conclusion. This was a statement made by the Planning Commission. And I say that's important because I've had several conversations with our city council on this particular issue. And as you'll find out later in this meeting, there seems to be a difference that at the moment cannot be bridged by two lawyers sitting down and working this out. So the issue of staff's authority to write these types of letters is going to come up. It was raised at that October 18 meeting. Commissioner Mark sat next to me and said that in very explicit, if not spirited terms. And I think that needs to be part of the record.
okay. Understood. Okay.
So I guess what I'll say is I don't like the use of the word several. There was only 4 of us here. I did not say anything on the topic, in part because I was absent from the October 4th meeting.
That is correct.
So I'd rather us not use the word several.
Several.
Some.
I mean, okay. Would you be okay with taking out the word several and said commissioners express the view?
Some.
And then leaving
Some
it to the
some of-
videotape for
yes.
the actual proof as to how many people said that?
Yes, some of the
Okay.
commissioners, yes.
Okay, some of the commissioners. Okay.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, so mechanically, we've rewritten what you wrote. So whatever piece of paper you have to hand off is no longer accurate. So I'll look to, I guess, Debbie and Lauren, the best way to capture. Well, I guess before we talk about the mechanics, I guess we probably should take a vote. Do we? Motion on the table.
Chair, there was a motion on the table.
Yes, and the motion was to amend the minutes, as I recall, it was a while ago.
Discussion to amend the
Me-
minutes.
Okay, so we did discuss it. So I guess we need to vote on that motion first, then we can vote on the actual language we'd like to, tell me out here. What do we-
How about if I make it a little simpler? How about if I withdraw my motion to adopt the amended minutes? And then we can go to what we're really here to talking about, which is what do we want to say on the record? Now, forgive me if I'm misstating anything. We've agreed that we're going to take out the word spirited. And I think that, I'm sorry. Several, okay. Some. I think, do we agree on some? Okay, I'll figure out where, oh, here it is, some. And I think what we've now done is to change the first clause. I hope that's the right grammatical description. I assume our teacher down there can tell me. But to basically say some commissioners expressed the view that the letter did not accurately reflect the concerns of the planning commission as set forth in the minutes of the October 4, 2022 meeting. Would that be an adequate substitute for that? Okay, and then we'll keep the rest of it.
Yes.
Okay, now I think we actually have to take a vote.
Okay.
So how about if I do this? Well, I know the chair is gonna, well, we're gonna see these minutes before they're adopted, right? Okay.
Yes.
So we'll have an opportunity to make sure that they're accurate. Okay, so here's what I would
Make that
propose.
as part of your motion then. you know,
So
that they
you're,
can-
so you're asking for the minutes to return back to the planning commission.
Right, okay. So,
Okay,
do I need to say that the minutes will come back at the next meeting for further approval?
Sure. Yes,
Okay.
you would.
okay.
Okay, so I would move as follows. I would move for approval of the minutes of the October 18, 2022 regular planning commission meeting as amended here on the dais with the updated version to be returned for review by the planning commission at its next meeting.
That'd be regularly scheduled meeting,
Sorry?
regularly scheduled meeting.
Well, I'm up for a special meeting, but probably regularly scheduled work too.
Thank you.
So the motion is to, one, bring the minutes back at the next regularly scheduled meeting with revisions. And the revisions are what Commissioner Wallace read to us as amended at the dais. Is that sufficient for a motion to move forward?
I'd like to hear the entire
Okay.
modification.
How,
it's on
you
the
want me to read
record.
the whole thing over again? I
Yeah,
can
so it's
do
in the
that.
record and then
Can
we
I,
can
can I
take
finish
it.
writing what I'm saying here? A concerns. A 10-4. As expressed. Okay, as expressed. Okay, all right, let's go again. Quote, a discussion took place concerning the October 17, 2022 letter from staff to the applicant for the proposed marketplace development project that was received by the commissioners after October 17th, 2022, stating that there were no identified inconsistencies with objective standards or criteria regarding the project, period. Some commissioners expressed the view that the letter did not accurately reflect the concerns of the Planning Commission as stated in the October 4, 2022 minutes, and that staff did not have the authority to determine on its own whether the project was consistent with the city's objective standards, period. Commissioner Wallace proposed language to modify the proposed October 4 meeting minutes, comma, but after it was noted that Commissioner Edwards was not present at the October 4 hearing and that Commissioner Kuznick, comma, who had been at the October 4 hearing, comma, was not present, comma, Commissioner Wallace moved to amend the minutes with recommended language and continue the hearing on the October 4 meeting minutes to the next meeting, period. The motion was seconded by Commissioner Marks and approved 3-0-1, period, close quote.
Okay, so the motion is to amend the minutes as read at the dais and to bring it back for commission approval at the next regularly scheduled planning commission meeting.
Correct.
Okay, sufficient, Debbie and Lauren? Okay, a decision. Okay, so now we're looking for a motion. We have a motion and we have a second, and now we can, I mean, this may confirm since the electronics are always there. Commissioner Wallace, you made this motion. This is your motion up here right now. That's the one you made the motion to?
Correct.
Okay, and then Commissioner Marks, you seconded this. Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we may vote. Okay, it passes 5-0-0-0. Thank you. Okay, I think we're up to item 8. Cindy. Okay, this is a non-public hearing action item. It is a status update on the housing element work of this year. There is no commission action required. It is just we get to listen and learn and get smart and ask questions.
Thank you and good evening. It's just going to take me a minute here just to wake up the computer and get it started. Okay. All right, so this evening I'm providing a presentation on the status of the housing element update. This is a similar presentation that was provided to the City Council last Tuesday evening. We wanted to provide this update as well to the Planning Commission so that everybody's on the same page as far as where we are with the housing element update. So just an overview of what we're going to cover tonight. I wanted to provide an update as to the work that's been accomplished to date on the housing element. We did receive a comment letter from the State Department of Housing and Community Development and comments on our draft housing element. So we're providing a summary update of the comments received. And then a short overview of the implications of non-compliant housing elements, and then an update to our housing element timeline based on the comments received from each CD. And so I know we have a lot of audience members, maybe their first time hearing about the housing element. So just a quick refresher, housing element is one of the mandated elements of the general plan. It's subject to statutory requirements through the state's government code and does require it to be reviewed by the Housing and Community Development Department. There is a housing element adoption deadline of January 31st of 2023. And every region in the state has a different deadline. The Bay Area region is set for next year in January. So the city currently does not have enough sites that are zoned to accommodate our regional housing needs allocation. So part of our effort in the general plan update and the housing element update is to look for adequate sites, and we've included that as part of our draft housing element. If the housing element is certified by May 31st, we have the city has the ability to take our time to rezone all of those sites, and that can, but that must be done by May 21st of 2026. If we are not able to adopt or certify our housing element by May 31st, then the rezoning obligations of the city, we would have to complete all of those rezonings by January 31st, 2024. So there were a couple of changes that occurred as we were preparing for our housing element update. Some of those things that I wanted to highlight were changes that occurred as of January 1st of this year. Those included new deadlines and minimum review periods. So a 30-day minimum review period for any draft housing elements, and then another waiting period to consider those comments before we could submit to HCD. There is a now 90-day review of initial drafts of housing element by HCD, and then any subsequent review by HCD requires a 60-day review period for any resubmittals. It also accelerated the rezoning requirements from 3 years to 1 year, depending on your compliance with certification. And then if rezonings are required to meet your regional housing needs, there's a number of different specific elements that cities are obligated to follow. So those include a by right requirement where if 20% of the units are going to be affordable to lower income households and does not need a subdivision, those projects can be allowed by right. Sites also have to be large enough to accommodate at least 16 units, and there has to be zoning in place that would accommodate at least 30 dwelling units per acre. And then the last bullet here, we must allow 100% residential developments on mixed-use sites. If you're relying on those mixed-use sites to meet your lower income RHNA, those sites are not obligated to provide a commercial or a non-residential component with the residential project. It can be a 100% residential development on a mixed-use site. And then another particular point of that 100% residential development, it requires that development be at least 50% residential by floor area. So a number of different things that the city is subject to because we are not able to meet our RHNA through the sites that we currently have zoned. And so just for everybody, as a reminder, we've been assigned 5,111 housing units by the Association of Bay Area Governments. So our region has allocated San Ramon little over 5,000 units that we have to accommodate. Of all of the sites that we've already approved and projects we've approved and our projected number of accessory dwelling units that we've approved, we're only meeting half of that obligation. So a little under 2,500 units have already been met through entitled projects and projected ADUs. So we have a shortfall of another 2,500 plus units to be able to make up with our rezoning. So all of that is in the draft housing element. For those following along at home, you can visit plansanramon.com to get more information and a copy of that draft. But that's all the work that has occurred through the drafting of the housing element, is to determine where those sites are going to go, what rezoning has to happen in order to meet the state mandate. So the work to date, and it's been a couple of months since we've last been with the Planning Commission. So just an update as far as last time, the initial kickoff of the housing element update and the general plan and climate action plan update was in the summer of 2021. The state released their regional housing needs numbers, and then ABAG assigned those final allocations just a little under a year ago, so December 2021. And so through July to this summer, we've been doing a number of outreach efforts, 8 study sessions, community workshops, 10 meetings with various committees and commissions throughout the city. Staff's attended 5 different community events, including the Art and Wind Festival and the Run for Education. We've done a number of different online and engagement efforts through social media and surveying, along with conducting stakeholder interviews, We've had 2 of our joint public hearings on the draft housing element with the City Council and Planning Commission. And then we've also established a separate general plan ad hoc committee as well as a mixed use ad hoc committee to continue to refine those discussions on mixed use and on the housing element and opportunity sites. And so after all of that effort and collective discussions with the community, we released our public review draft in May of this year. That review period ran through June, and on June 21st, City Council and Planning Commission at their joint meeting requested some updates be made to that draft and then have that draft submitted to HCD. So on July 20th, all of those edits were completed and submitted to HCD, and that began the 90-day review period that HCD has to review draft housing elements. That period, the 90-day period runs July 20th and to October 18th. And during that time, the city has continued to work on the rezoning work through our ad hoc and through our consultants, and that effort is ongoing. So on the 90th day, the city received our letter from HCD. That's been included as part of your packet this evening. The letter essentially identifies that the city needs to do some additional work on our draft housing element in order to be in compliance with state law. So there's 4 topic areas of the letter, and I've put those in the next 2 slides. The first topic is on our housing needs, resources, and constraints. There's some additional assessment that the city needs to do on how we comply with fair housing law, providing some additional information about maybe appropriate policies and programs that we can use to further fair housing. We also have to do some additional analysis for extremely low income households and special needs populations, and then provide additional information and analysis on the inventory of our housing sites. And based on that information, there may be some additional need to review realistic capacities and then trends on those sites, and then how zoning standards may impact those realistic capacities. And then further analysis on the impact of local development standards, building codes, and then our application procedures, and then price of land and how that potentially can constrain housing development. So a number of different analyses that have to be done in order to convince the state that we've adequately addressed our housing needs and our resources. The second topic area is regarding housing programs. So in the housing element, we have a number of programs that are in that document that tells the community how we intend to meet our housing obligations and our goals. The state would like further detail on the implementation of various housing programs. And then there may be some additional needs for more programs to adequately address housing sites and housing constraints based on the additional analysis that's needed on the housing needs. The third topic area is related to quantified objectives, and this essentially is identifying a specific number of units that are going to be assisted or created through our housing program. So they want a number of units that's going to correlate to the programs that we have in place. And then the fourth topic area is about water sewer priority. As you know, state law has changed recently where water and sewer agencies are required to grant priority water and sewer service to housing developments that include lower income units. And so one of the requirements of state law is that we have to send our housing element to the providers so that they're aware of where these opportunity sites are, which one, what we've identified as priorities, so that when they do receive requests for service, that they can adequately plan for the priority service. So this slide represents up-to-date information as of October 18th. So I know we're a week from that. So some of these numbers may have changed, but There are 21 Bay Area jurisdictions that have currently received 6-cycle review comments from HCD. 20 of those jurisdictions have received a letter that has said that their first draft is not in compliance, or maybe even their second draft is not in compliance with state law. And so there will be a need to prepare some additional edits to those drafts. There are 48 jurisdictions still in their 90-day initial review with HCD. And so they're still waiting for their first draft of HCD's letter. And then 40 jurisdictions that have not submitted their draft housing elements. They may be going through a process similar to what we've done with public engagement. And so they're just getting ready or preparing to submit their drafts to HCD. So in terms of San Ramon status, we're fairly well ahead of the 109 Bay Area jurisdictions in having received our letter and knowing what steps we need to take to be in compliance. Staff was fortunate enough to have a call with HCD last week, and that call essentially, HCD said that they were generally positive that the city was on the right path towards resolving comments before the January statutory deadline, and that the city's draft in large part addresses key components of state law. And we've set a meeting for this week to discuss any necessary edits to be made in order for us to be in compliance. And so that meeting is set for tomorrow, meeting with HCD to further discuss specific points on how the city can address compliance. So next couple of slides are implications of noncompliance with the housing element. So San Ramon aims to have completion of the adoption of the housing element by January 31st, 2023, but a lot of that's dependent on HCD's review and our local public review process. So as I mentioned, there's still a 60-day review time that's built into state law for subsequent reviews of housing elements. And so considering we're in November, we have a very quick turnaround for that draft and the work that needs to be done to make sure that we address each of the points in HCD's letter and get that resubmitted in time for them to provide us additional comments. So HCD's approval is not required for a housing element to be found substantially in compliance with state law. Cities may adopt its own findings explaining why its housing element is substantially in compliance despite HCD's findings or what their draft letters may say. However, HCD is authorized to refer agencies to the Attorney General if it does find that housing elements are out of compliance. So something just to keep in mind is that the city does have the ability to adopt its housing element by January 31st if we believe that our draft element is in compliance with state law. We just would have to make those findings of consistency. Jurisdictions that failed to adopt a compliant housing element within 120 days of that January deadline, as I mentioned, does require rezoning within a year of that date. And then after the statutory deadline of January 31st, there's been a lot of news about builder's remedy, some articles in the newspaper. And so it's something I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on. Builder's remedy provision is codified in the government code through the Housing Accountability Act. And so the city could be subject to builder's remedy if we are not, we have not adopted our housing element by January 31st. And so builder's remedy is really a streamlining tool that provides builders an option to file a development application for housing development that has at least 20% lower income housing, or the project has 100% moderate income housing where a site may not be in conformance with a jurisdiction zoning or general plan. So What that effectively means is that if a site isn't zoned for residential development, potentially a builder could use the builder's remedy provision in state law to submit an application for a housing development. It has to be a residential development where it's either 100% residential or a mixed-use development that has at least 2/3 of the project designated for residential use, or it could be transitional and supportive housing as well. But those are projects that would qualify under builder's remedy. There's a very limited ability to deny a qualifying housing development project when a city is out of compliance with our housing element. Projects are still subject to the California Environmental Quality Act and requires environmental review. And the cities may apply local objective design development standards, but there is an implication to not having a adopted housing element by the deadline. And so just to conclude, we've updated our housing element adoption timeline and built in some of these statutory requirements for adoption. So as we've mentioned, we've received our HCD letter. We are working on meeting with the state and addressing those comments and working through November to complete that. And then hopefully with the help of the state and our consultant, return a compliant draft to HCD for review in November, which would run a 60-day mandatory review of that document. We're hopeful that the state can return comments back to us before 60 days. That's one of the efforts with meeting with them ahead of time to try to make sure that we will be able to adequately address those. And then because of Measure G, we'll still have an obligation to have our third public hearing with the Planning Commission in order to then receive a recommendation to the City Council for the housing element draft. And our goal is to conduct those public hearings in January, potentially in December if we get comments back from the state early enough. And then, of course, certifying that housing element by January 31st. So meaning the City Council would take action in adopting that housing element before the January 31st deadline. And so with that, that concludes my presentation. If there's questions, I'm more than happy to take those.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Marks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Cindy, could we go back to the slide titled Implications of Non-Compliance? The second bullet statement, HCD approval is not required for a housing element to be found substantially compliant. However, HCD can turn a city over to the Attorney General. I don't suppose that if you got turned over to the Attorney General, you're going to do 3 to 5 at Leavenworth. But what are the things that the state could do, or the AG could do, if a city chose to go this route and got turned over to the AG and the AG agreed we're out of compliance? What would happen at that point?
Well, so compliance with housing law affects a number of different things that cities do. It affects grants that we may qualify for. It may affect the issuance of building permits or the ability for a city to be able to say no to development projects. And so if the state were to find that we were out of compliance, they could take a number of remedies to determine that once the city's out of compliance, that builder's remedy would be in play. And so oftentimes the city may adopt their housing element without the certification from the state or a letter from the state saying that they are in compliance to potentially circumvent builder's remedy. But, you know, if the state AG were to say that we're out of compliance, builder's remedy would effectively be in play for us to not be able to disapprove housing developments.
I asked that question, not because you haven't explained this before, but because I believe you have, but to try and connect it to some of the comments we heard previously when we were talking about the minutes, where several people commented, and I have heard this from other people in the community. We've built enough housing. We've done enough. Why do we have to do any more? And I think it's important that the general public understand that while we may think we have done enough, and I believe that the city has done quite a lot, if the state finds that we have not, then there are consequences, and those consequences are serious, particularly the builder's remedy. As it is under state law, we have lost a lot of local discretion through various state laws that have been passed. We would lose even more discretion. And so for those folks who feel that the city planning commission or the city council is just approving housing left and right because, you know, that's just who we are, or for some reason we are just crazily pro-development, they need to understand that there are consequences here that we are trying to avoid by doing the housing that we are approving and trying to rationalize where we put it to the extent possible. That doesn't mean that all of us up here are going to agree with every location that is proposed for housing, but to ignore what the state is imposing on the city and saying we've done enough for housing is to open the door for the worst case kind of development situation that a city can find itself in. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's some very recent examples of the AG taking, you know, up this issue of noncompliance. Just next door in Pleasanton, there's a example of noncompliance and forcing essentially a halt of all building permits for anything non-residential until the city was able to demonstrate that they could be in compliance. And we have to remember that housing element timeline is 8-year cycles, and that as much housing as we've already entitled, 2,500 units that we expect to be built over the next 8 years through 2031, we're still halfway short on the actual number of units that the state mandates us to be able to accommodate. And so as much as we've done in terms of approving projects, we need to have another half of the housing element met plus an adequate buffer to be able to demonstrate that throughout the 8 years, we'll have enough sites to accommodate the state mandate.
To this way, questions for Cindy? Commissioner Kuzic?
I do have one. And this is the next slide, back to the builder's remedy. And so where it says that that a developer can put in a project if it meets certain requirements in the jurisdiction zoning, that's not in the zoning. Do we have any of those sites off the top of your head in which should worst case scenario this happen where we get to the builder's remedy, just so that we have a point of reference of what might be a site like this?
So I know we're talking about it. It's the next item, after this meeting, right? But, or after this item, but the next item before you is a office complex that is proposing to rezone its site because it doesn't allow for residential currently. If builder's remedy were in place, for example, that site that currently is office zoned and does not allow for residential could potentially use builder's remedy and say, if I'm going to dedicate 100% of this as moderate income or 20% of the units are going to be set aside for lower income, the city would not be able to apply the requirements to amend the general plan as a step to approving that project. They would be allowed through builder's remedy to file an application.
So is there a reasonable assurance that our parks and open space are not vulnerable to this builder's remedy?
So not necessarily. There are certain qualifying housing, there are certain obligations that cities still have to consider. So we still have to consider the environmental impact through CEQA. We would have to consider ownership of those properties, because oftentimes the parks and open space areas generally are owned by the city or other resource agencies that generally don't have an inherent interest to develop housing there. But any of those properties that are not currently zoned for residential use has the ability to have an application filed for a residential development on those sites.
Thank you.
So I don't have a question. I just want to take a minute to thank staff. This is a really heavy lift, and following the legislation and unpacking the HCD letter. This is extremely complicated stuff, and we appreciate very much the explanation of what needs to be done, what's been done, the response to it, and what the potential consequences are for noncompliance. So thank you.
Commissioner Wallace.
Hi there. I watched your presentation of the City Council. I do not intend to get into the weeds because I am more than happy to have the staff respond to HCD's letter about programs and things like that. But I had a little more practical question. Do you have the ability to go back to what we call packet page 14? It's titled Housing Element Requirements Continued. It says change to state law.
Yep.
Keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going. There you go. Okay. Here's my first question. Let's assume for purposes of my question that at the end of January, the City Council has adopted the housing element that the Planning Commission has proposed, and that the city has completed all of the rezoning that would allow all those housing sites to be developed per the new housing element. But unfortunately, our housing element as revised according to the last HCD letter is sitting someplace in Sacramento. On February 1st, do any of those bullet points that are under the heading, if rezoning is necessary, apply? Because we have in fact rezoned all of the sites to account for our housing element opportunity sites.
If a city has adopted their rezoning to meet their RENA before January 31st, then these bullets that are listed under rezoning would not automatically apply. Right?
Okay, that's what I thought. Now,
There's-
I'm sorry, I
There
didn't mean
is
to
a-
cut you off.
No, I just wanted to make sure that there is a potential that the state could say some of your sites are not appropriate sites to meet your RENA. And if that is the case and they require us to look for alternative sites that currently are not zoned for residential, that we would have to still evaluate to make sure that we still have adequate sites to meet our RENA, with the buffer. But it would not, these bullets would not automatically apply if the city had done a rezoning by January 31st.
Okay, that was my first question. My second question, you actually brought it up, and that is, let's assume for purposes of our question that when we go the second iteration of our housing amount, one you're working on now, and the state comes back and says, this site and this site, we don't think cuts it. But it turns out that even if you take those out, we still have more than enough housing opportunity sites to meet the RENA numbers. Are we still okay under that circumstance?
We should be okay under that circumstance.
Okay.
You, because we have identified at least a 20% buffer for lower income. And we could potentially use that buffer to demonstrate that we still have adequate sites, even if we were to eliminate others.
Called the fudge factor. Okay. Last question. There is a self-help remedy in the Housing Act, as you pointed out, which is that if we don't want to roll the dice on whether HCD acts on housing element number 2, the city can do its own certification that it's compliant. Does that compliance require the participation of both the Planning Commission and the City Council?
It does, because of our local process that requires, prior to amendments to the general plan, which the housing element is part of, it does require Planning Commission recommendation on a 4/5, so supermajority recommendation to the City Council before the City Council can adopt that housing element. And so there is still a local process required prior to local adoption of the housing element. It just may not necessarily be certified by the state.
Okay, so let me ask a more narrow question, which is, if we adopt a housing element, is that tantamount to certification that the housing element is compliant with state law?
It's the city would be identifying through findings that we are in compliance with state law. And so essentially that the draft, whatever is adopted, is substantially in compliance with state law. So
Okay.
we would be, as a city, be identifying that we meet and are in compliance with state law.
Okay, so let's just take adopting the housing element. Are you saying that as part of the adoption process, we would be making the necessary findings of fact that would allow us to claim self-help if we didn't hear back from HCD by January 31st?
So a city is obligated under state law. So state law has changed to require that with any adoption of a housing element, we have to make findings of consistency with state law. The state in their letter to us can tell us that we are in compliance, or a city can make those findings on our own to determine that we're in compliance. Either way, the state can make those, can tell us that we're ready to make those findings, or the city can take it upon themselves to say that we believe we're in compliance with state law. But with any adoption, we have to make those findings of consistency.
So once the city council adopts the housing element that we've drafted, that also creates the self-help remedy if needed?
Right. The city council will also have to make those findings
Okay.
as part of their adoption.
Okay, so, this has probably never come up before, but have there been occasions where a city has gone through the process to where they have adopted a revised housing element, it's been certified compliant with state law, and it's made all the rezoning changes that are necessary to support development of the housing opportunity sites? Do you know of any situations where HCD has run over to the Attorney General and complained?
I haven't done that research, so I don't know off the top of my head. I do know that there are other cities that have self-certified and found themselves and made the findings in that they were in compliance with state law before receiving their official letter from HCD. So there are a number of cities that have done that. I don't know what the time span was between the time that they adopted and then actually received the letter from HCD, but there have been some cities that have done that. Rezoning is sort of a whole different part of the equation, and whether or not they had adequate sites or not. Builder's remedy wouldn't necessarily kick in if you've adopted your housing element, but you haven't done your rezoning.
Right, I got
You
that.
can, you still have authorization over those sites.
Right, that's why I brought up that the hypothetical assumed both adoption of a housing element and also rezoning to meet the needs of the housing opportunity sites and the revised housing element. In other words, you weren't rolling the dice or waiting until the next 120 days to do that. Okay. Well, I wish you all luck on working with HCD and particularly in your conference call tomorrow.
So through the chair, just to add on a little bit. So we do have a call with HCD, and in our conversation, which Cicely mentioned, we've known the reviewer for many years and done many updates with the state and this review team. So they're well familiar with San Ramon. And, there is I think I can say, a willingness on both parties to get this element done by January 31st, because we are so close, as they have indicated to us. So the focus of staff over the next month or so is really going to be working through the element and the programs of the element solely. So as Cindy indicated, if we adopt by the program element by the 31st of January, then we're not subject to builder's remedy. But we will still have rezonings to do after the fact. So I just want, so the commission understands that when we adopt on the 31st, the rezonings will not be a part of that package.
Oh, I thought that one of our goals was to have the rezoning in place by January 31st.
We were trying to do that, but based on this builder remedies implication, it's more important to certify the housing element and its programs and then continue to work on the rezonings after the fact. There's just not enough time to do both hand in hand. And I know there's a very important emphasis on the mixed use zoning standards that we've been discussing at our ad hoc committee. And so there's just not enough hours in a day to accomplish both. So I'll make sure that's clear to the commission.
Okay.
And so our focus will be on the program elements, the programs of the housing element. And so the zoning discussions will take up next year at this point in time.
Okay, well, I appreciate your clarification of that because at least I was under the impression that we needed to get all the rezoning done by January 31st or the world would end. But I appreciate that the fact that you're going through the program analysis first. And obviously, if we can get the housing element certified on that basis, it makes the rezoning not necessarily a lot easier, but it's not exactly the pressure cooker that it was when we were trying to do it by the end of January. So thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, as we know, we lost 6 months, and how we had those 6 months, then we would not be in this situation. But unfortunately, we do. And we want to make sure we do a really good job of our zoning codes update. And so it's paramount to really get this document focused and protect the city. So those sites that potentially could have housing where we don't want it doesn't occur.
Okay, I have just two schedule questions on the timeline, and then we'll open up public comment. If you could bring the timeline slide up. It's really more all about us. So between revise housing element and resubmit to HCD, do you anticipate, and that's all happening this month, do you anticipate having to come before either council or planning commission prior to the resubmittal, or will that just go on its own path without our involvement?
So I think the goal is after we have our conversation with HCD tomorrow, we'll know how far we are in terms of addressing their comments. We'll have a better sense after our call tomorrow exactly what that approach is going to be, because some of those edits may take some collaboration, and some of those may be fairly straightforward. And so depending on HCD's comments about how simple of a edit those might be, we'll have more to come on that.
Okay. And then similar question, the January 23 between receiving the 60-day review, which I think we're probably optimistically hoping it won't take 60 days, but worst case it could. And then the adoption by the end of January. How many public hearings do you anticipate needing to have between us and the city council and or joint?
At a minimum, our requirement is to have one public hearing with the planning commission and one with the city council. So that would meet our Measure G requirements to consider any amendments to general plans with at least 3 hearings with the planning commission, 3 with the city council. So the meetings that we had in May and in June with the planning commission, with the city council, those complete 2 out of the 3 public hearings that are required by Measure G. We need at least 1 more in front of both bodies before we can adopt the housing element. Hopefully, with those edits being minor, they may not necessitate additional continuation of public hearings. That's our hope, but certainly the process is dictated by the commission and council. So I'll say we need the minimum 1.
And that's 1 of each body, because we've had
Of
the
each
2.
body, correct.
Okay, so sometime in January, we should expect to look at this, and then they should get it after us.
And I would expect, I guess in my perfect world, December 20th, we're back in front of the commission. It's the Merry Christmas. So don't make any plans for that that Tuesday if you don't mind. And if you're going to be out of town, please let me know now. But that's my perfect world tomorrow. Is that state that you're great. Here are your comments. A couple comments on sites. We go. But if not, we're anticipating a special meeting the January 11th for the commission, and then probably January 30th for the city council because of the noticing requirements. So that's how tight, to put it all in perspective, that's how tight our schedule is.
Right. No, it's pretty obvious. When they get 60 days to look at it, and they get 90 days to look at it, and they take them all.
Well, we're hopeful that we'll be able to expedite that review, but there's no promises at this point.
We'll keep hoping. Okay, let's go ahead and take public comment. Do we have any speaker cards?
We do not have any speaker cards. There is no late communication, but we do have hands raised.
Okay, and how many hands do we have?
Right now, there are 2.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and take the first one, please?
Call-in user 1.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I just want to raise some questions regarding the attachments in the agenda packet that I'm reading right now. I'm failing to see that the reason why we were given areas of improvement is solely because that we're not meeting the RHNA numbers. I actually beg you to please read those A through D pointers that was written up by Mr. McDougall, a senior program manager at the HCD. Specifically, I think one area is quite puzzling to me because it is something that could be easily met, and I'm not sure why our planning department failed to meet that. And this is under the section of electronic sites inventory, where we were cited for failing to submit an electronic version of the sites inventory with its adopted housing element. So something like this is we should have already done in the past, because these are inventory. It is not inventory if it's not in the past. It's not future. So I really don't know, like, why our staff seem to be having their elbows facing outwardly to help, other people screw our city. I'm sorry, I apologize for such crude comment, because there's no other way of putting it more tenderly or respectfully, because of, these are facts. And I'm witnessing this repeatedly from attorneys down to planning, department staff, and, just nobody's looking out for us. I feel that these pointers can be easily improved without really discussing about the RHNA numbers and all that. If you would please just be sincere and honest about addressing these issues first. And because of the way it's written, it's not really quantitative. It is qualitative, and therefore it is really up for interpretation. So I personally have a lot of doubts in how the staff is interpreting what the letter is really saying. From what I'm hearing from Ms. E, everything she addresses to the Planning Commission is in quantitative terms. When this letter was written in qualitative terms, it's not talking to each other. You are failing to convince me that we are not meeting these requirements because we're failing to read the numbers. May I suggest to you to please hire another outside lawyer to read this more carefully and make sure that we understand what the letter is really saying, so we can truly nip it on the bud that, you know, is really what the problem is and not what we think it is by crunching numbers. Maybe we are under the pressure of developers to do so, but it's not what HCD is addressing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Nicole?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi. I just wanted to follow up as part of this most recent conversation on the housing. As mentioned, I have not been participating. I have not been putting in my voice until tonight. I do feel that I need to add, I myself am aware of the state's housing requirements, but I do feel that I need to comment because it's clear that the comments about the marketplace are being misconstrued as people arguing about housing in general. That is not my argument. The family that owns Bishop Ranch has done a beautiful job for decades, and I'm sure they're going to do a beautiful job on the housing that they're building, which will be higher stories, but they're not building it next to a small community or taking over a marketplace. So I want it to be really clear too to the commissioners, the voices that you're hearing are not strictly against housing, it's how you do it and where you do it. And I don't know if you've already heard about the preserves, which recently opened up and turned over, are now in a situation where they can't get reasonable fire insurance. They're now getting hit with a $3 million a year premium, where their annual assessments or monthly assessments are going from $300 to $1,500. You're now making San Ramon's housing unaffordable because of other outside factors and risks of how or where housing is being built. So it's not against the housing, it's a matter of how it's being done. And I do feel I needed to raise that point because of the comment that the people commenting before don't understand that there's a need to build housing based on state requirements. That is understood. That was all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more speakers?
Michelle Pelkey?
Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello? Yep. I just wanted to echo the same sentiments. I feel that the presentation that was just given was merely, in my humble opinion, for the audience of the marketplace. People that apparently are complaining about building, which is absolutely untrue. What we are doing is voicing our concerns of grocery store for housing. There are other places where you can put housing. We understand that growth and development is necessary. Everyone who has spoken has been here 20, 30, 40 years. We've seen it. We're not meeting this grand presentation from this person who just for 10, 15 minutes, had to explain the state requirements of housing elements. We get that. And I'm sure hoping that you guys have seen this presentation before, that this isn't your first time being on a planning commission, that you already know these laws and understand how this all happens. So I kind of feel like that presentation was more for us. And it was like, well, we need to understand that, this is how it has to happen because this state is requiring it. But the thing that point I would like to make is residents, we know that, you know, we're hearing it from cities all over the state of California. It's how you do it. And I'm sure you've heard many residents say this before. We don't want to look like the next Dublin. You know, don't tear down a already very popular marketplace just to put housing. Put the housing somewhere else. It's so simple. Put it in an area where you don't have over 1,000 emails of people, where you don't have every single week people asking you and giving you reasons why it should stay, you know? So anyways, I just thought those are we understand. It's just do it better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Next caller.
There are no more speakers.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close public comment. Any other commission comments? No, no. Just thank you for the hard work, and it's obvious there's a lot of work to go still. And I think you've heard it before. We will be happy to meet whenever you schedule a meeting to get this done, because I think we're all extremely motivated to have a not only certified, but adopted and certified housing element by January 31. So, you know, schedule it and we will be there. Please. Okay. Okay. It is 10 after 9. Pleasure of the commission. Do you want to take a break? Yes, we're going to take a quick break, but I think Commissioner Edwards, prior to us taking a break, has something to say.
Yes, I'm going to need to recuse myself from the next matter due to my firm's relationship with Trumark.
Okay. We will wish you well not being here. Why don't we take 10 minutes? So Okay, welcome back. Came to my attention that there's an item 12 as part of the commissioner comments that would be good to have all 5 of us here to participate in. So I would like to ask to rearrange and handle part of item 12 prior to the TrueMark item 10.1. I do apologize for y'all for sitting here. And this one will be very short, there's a delay. So if I could ask for a motion to move part of item 12 to right now, that's between item 9 and 10, and we'll come back to the normal study and staff liaison reports after item 10.1.
I will move.
Thank you. It's been moved. May we have a second? And second, so it's been moved by Commissioner Edwards and seconded by Commissioner Kuznick. Or vice versa. Okay. Commissioner Kuznick pushed the button, so she's the mover, and then Commissioner Edwards can press the second. Okay, we can just take a quick vote. Okay, motion passes 5-0-0-0. Okay, with that, Commissioner Wallace would like to make a few comments.
Well, the comments that I'm going to make are in connection with a motion that I want to make now and 2 requests for further discussion that aren't as time sensitive, in my opinion, as item number 1. So the first thing I would like to do is this. As everyone knows from the discussions we've had on the October 4th, October 18th, and tonight, there is a difference of opinion about which body in the city of San Ramon should be making consistency decisions on residential projects that are subject to the state's Housing Accountability Act. As a preface, I have had several conversations in person and on the phone with both staff and also the city attorney. And at this point, I can safely say that there is not a meeting of the minds on this particular subject. I think there is a meeting of the minds that this is an issue that needs to be decided. So I hereby move the commission to take actions necessary to place on the agenda for the November 18, 2022 regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting the following subject matter. First, whether under the municipal code, general plan, and zoning ordinance, an application to construct residential housing subject to the California Housing Accountability Act requires the decision whether such an application is consistent with, quote, an applicable plan, program, policy, ordinance, standard, requirement, or other similar provision, close quote, of the city of San Ramon, including the city's general plan, any community plan, any specific plan, the zoning ordinance, any design review standards and criteria, subdivision standards and criteria, and any other rules, regulation, requirements, and policies of the city of San Ramon being made by the Planning Commission rather than by city staff, and to decide and write, if necessary, the appropriate notice for a residential housing project specified in California Government Code Section 65589.5, subparagraph J2, capital A, close paren. Second, if at such meeting, the Planning Commission does decide that it is the appropriate city body to make the aforementioned decision, that the Planning Commission take, if considered reasonable and necessary, steps to submit this issue to a final decision by the San Ramon City Council. That's the motion on my first item.
So make sure I understand. It's November the 18th is the suggested date, and it is, in quick summary, the determining body of determining consistency with general plan, zoning code, etc. Is that?
That is correct, and I would amend the motion to this effect. Obviously, this motion is going to require, well, it doesn't require, but it probably will have the participation of staff. If staff advises us that the particular date of November 18, and I picked a specific date to work against, is not feasible for it, then I would designate the chair of the planning commission to work out an alternative hearing date in the near future thereafter, because this is a decision that needs to be made sooner rather than later, because we have projects coming down the pipeline that trigger the Housing Accountability Act provisions, and we need to have this decision in place in order to make a rational decision on those particular items.
I will add that November 18th is a Friday.
Did I get the wrong? What's the Tuesday? What's the Tuesday?
The 15th.
The 15th. Well, I guess, well, we could meet the 18th, but I guess it wouldn't be regularly scheduled. So thank you for correcting me. So I would amend my motion to the 15th.
Through the chair, because this is not, it seems like to be a motion that's
I
not,
can't hear you.
it's not an agendized item to which you can do a motion that someone could come and comment upon. I think we could take that comment and have staff put it on a future planning commission agenda. And then, so that way it'll be, you can ask staff to put it on a future agenda. And at that time, it'll be agendized. You have your full discussion about what you're proposing. And then at that time, there'll be recommendations to forward to city council policy or whatever that might be. But I would recommend, just having, a request, if that's the consensus, to staff to please place it on a future planning commission agenda. Ideally, I guess you can name a date if you were looking for a date, or the next soonest possible date, or something, whatever you'd like to say. But because I would caution against an official motion which you vote on, because it's not an agendized item tonight.
Do we need to at least get consensus of 3 of the 5 commissioners that we agree to have this item placed on a future agenda? Otherwise, it's just one voice.
Yeah, even if though it's one voice, if it seems like it appears from staff that it seems like a consensus, they can, just deem it, appropriate enough to put it on the agenda. And at that time, if 3 of you don't agree, you can just say, you don't agree at that time of such a recommendation.
Oh, well, wait a minute. I heard you say the words "if appropriate."
I'm sorry. If I said at the time when it's agendized, you can, as the commissioners deem
Okay,
appropriate.
so as I understand what you're proposing is that we agendize the motion for a subsequent meeting.
You will need to put the item that you're requesting, basically, that you're asking for the determination that I guess commission has the authority to, determine consistency or so forth. If that's the question that you want to have and you want to have a discussion about it, I would recommend directing staff to put it on a future planning commission agenda.
How about this? So what you're saying is that we need to put on the agenda the fact that we're going to make a motion to have at a subsequent meeting a discussion of this particular issue.
No, you are not making any motion tonight, but you will be putting on an agenda the topic, the discussion itself. You're not you're not agendizing the motion
But
to go to another meeting.
Okay.
You're
So-
making a request that it be placed, this topic be placed on a future planning commission agenda for discussion, and as appropriate, motion to direct, the
Right.
item to go to whoever you would like.
Right. We're not at the place of discussing the item itself. We just want to get an item on the agenda. And it sounds like the recommendation is not to make an official motion, and Commissioner Wallace's request, and you're looking to say, is there general okay to put something on the agenda?
If you have, would you like to voice each commissioner give
Okay.
voice thoughts
Okay.
as to
Got it.
that
Got it.
topic.
Okay.
Oh, okay, just so we're clear, my motion was not to have the discussion tonight. My motion was to put it on the agenda at a future date.
Okay.
I still don't
One
feel
motion.
it's appropriate to have a
Motion.
official motion, just, it's something
Okay.
as simple as asking or
Okay.
directing,
So I
say staff.
I can poll the commissioners and say, do you agree to have a future
Got
agenda item of this topic?
Directing, I can live with.
Okay.
Asking is a different subject because that requires permission of someone else. So I think the planning commission controls its own agenda. Am I right?
Well, I believe staff, dictates based on, as they get applications and so forth, they direct the agenda, but the commissioners may ask for items to be discussed, like a presentation on code enforcement or whatever the topic that they are interested in. And you have done that many times before. So if this is a topic of discussion and interest to you in a future meeting, then just ask staff to please put it on for another future meeting.
You don't have a problem putting it on the 15th, do you?
Well, I would, with Alicia, her comment was that, a future agenda item. I would caution on the 15th only because of, we may need that meeting for a joint session on the housing element.
Okay,
So I think allowing myself to work with the chair on an appropriate agenda date would be what I would ask the commission to give deference to.
which I did add to my amended
You
motion
did.
to do that.
Very much.
Okay.
Okay, first of all, we're not making a motion. We're not taking a vote.
Motion.
I'm looking and no one is shaking their head no about this request to a future agenda item. So nobody is shaking their head no, except for Commissioner Marks, as he wants to speak.
Well, the concern I have is not the motion itself. It's dealing with an issue that could come up again in the time period between now and an uncertain date. I mean, the thing that triggered this whole request was the letter that went out on the 18th or whatever the date was, a decision made by the staff that at least some of the commissioners, not all the commissioners, disagreed with. Are there other projects that are in the time frame where within the 30 days we have to make a decision as a city that it is consistent with the general plan or not? I think
Correct,
the
correct.
date,
And I think
the
the date is
that we
critical.
set
The date is important.
is
Yes.
important.
Okay. Okay. So I think we've had the discussion without going too far into the discussion. The direction is to have this agendized for the 15th of November, that Tuesday, unless and until staff proposes a second date because that date is taken up, Is that satisfactory? That works, but right now its target is the request is the 15th of November, unless some circumstances prevent that, in which case it'll be understand the urgency.
Well, as I said, I think that Ms. Chamberlain agreed to, and also when I was talking to the city attorney, he was supportive of it, is that if the 15th is not feasible, as opposed to not preferable, but not feasible, that prior to the 15th, that staff work with our chair to come up with an alternative date. Because I don't want to be in a position where on the 14th, oh, by the way, we're continuing the hearing.
Correct. Understood. Okay.
Work has to be put into this on both sides of the table of this. So,
Okay. Okay.
okay, I have two other requests, not motions, requests. All right. Second, that the planning commission take actions necessary to place on the agenda for a forthcoming planning commission meeting to be held in the near future, but in no event later than January 3, 2023, which I hope is a Tuesday, a discussion of the following subject matter. Quote, the proper interpretation of the terms, quote, density, residential density, close quote, and quote, acres, comma, net, close quote, as used in the general plan and applied to proposed residential developments in the city of San Ramon. The third request I would make, again, a request, not a motion, is related to this. Third, that the planning commission take actions necessary to place on the agenda for a forthcoming planning commission meeting to be held in the near future, but in no event later than January 3rd, 2023, a discussion of the following subject matter, quote, the proper interpretation of the terms, quote, proposed project, close quote, and quote, mixed use project, close quote, as used in the zoning ordinance of the city of San Ramon, and in particular, whether a proposed mixed use project, small a, close paren, requires new structures on the project area that provide both residential and non-residential uses on the project area, or B, close paren, allows construction of new structures for which only one type of use is included, as long as the project area has an existing structure that contains the other type of use. These are two elements to what is a large part of our proposed housing element, which is mixed use. Mixed use has been the subject at virtually every ad hoc meeting, but we've never wrestled with either of these two issues.
Okay, so without moving into the discussion of the item or lobbying pros or sides, so the request was to by 1-3 or similar as before, working with planning staff to agendize this topic for the 1-3 planning commission meeting. And if that is not possible, not convenient, but not possible, to select an alternate date.
Yes.
Okay.
So I will add on that request that those are topics that we will be discussing as part of the general plan, the zoning ordinance update. So those are coming probably very quickly on the heels of the certification of the housing element. So probably around the February, March timeframe.
Okay, well, it's always good to have a earlier than later discussion on these issues, particularly since these issues may come up on some of the housing projects that are in our pipeline. So,
okay, so. Okay.
So did I get it right? We're good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we did get heads going up and down, so there's nobody that's opposed to this as an item, and we will move away from this topic. And I'm looking at Debbie, she looks okay. She has it. Okay. Now, thank you all for indulging us in this. We can now move on to item 10, the public hearing, with the exception of, as I'm introducing as you're walking out the door. Yes, you already excused yourself. So,
Thank you.
okay.
And apologize. That's what I gotta do.
We understand. No, thank you.
You still have time to make it before fieldwork closes.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards. Okay, item 10.1, that's a continued hearing of the Trumark Townhomes at 2481 Deerwood Drive, and Lauren has a staff report to get it started.
Good evening. So I'm going to provide some recap and overview of the project and some of the project history. The applicant is here to go over some of the details of the revisions that they've made based on Planning Commission and Architectural Review Board comments. And then I'll talk very briefly about the CEQA mitigated negative declaration that's in process right now. It's actually under public review right now. So this is Deerwood Townhomes, 2481 Deerwood Drive. It's currently designated general plan office. It's zoned as administrative office, and it's approximately 4.4 acre sites as 4.43 acres as it sits today. Here's a view of the property. As you can see, it's surrounded by different types of residential to the north, east, and west. So this is the proposed parcel configuration that's part of the development application. So what we're doing is creating two lots In addition, there's a condominium map for the individual units. But the upper lot where the development will occur is approximately 2.77 acres. And then the lower parcel, 1.66 acres, will be designated as open space, and there's an existing drainage easement on it. This was also part of the concept review several years ago. We talked about unbuildable lands for slope and creek issues. So the proposed amendment to the general plan that we're looking at is going to multifamily, high density residential, 14 to 30 units per acre. And then the open space designation of the general plan as shown on the image to the right. And then zoning revisions proposed are going to be high density residential, 22 to 30 units per acre, and open space 2 would be the designation. In the staff report, and I noted that there is one change to the density calculation for the zoning. We had not properly netted out the easements and roads to the buildings themselves. And so that's reflected in this change. So it went from medium high density residential under zoning to high density. And it's just because it tipped into the next range. So again, the project itself will demolish the 51,000 square foot office building. 61 townhomes are being proposed. They're 3 stories, 35 feet maximum. They're alley loaded 2-car garage units. There's a private loop, and then there's 15 guest spaces provided on site. This is an image from Deerwood Drive up on top, as well as a section that shows the upper portion of the sites where the townhomes are, and then the lower portion that remains as open space as it heads down toward the Crow Canyon Road. So this is just a sample from the project plans of types of floor plans that are available. This is an example of about 1,800 square foot unit with 2-car traditional garage, and it shows the general layout. And then this is an example of one of the smaller units at 1,420 square feet that has a tandem configuration, and it's vertical as well. So in terms of the prior project review, we went to the Architectural Review Board in May of 2022 and got some project feedback. Then right on the back of that, we came to the Planning Commission for the first of the 3 public hearings under Measure G. The comments we got were related similar to what we had heard from the Architectural Review Board, some concerns about pedestrian circulation, play areas, and accents, landscape, and the like. Then on August 18th, revised set of plans was submitted back to the ARB. The ARB was supportive of the revisions and recommended final architectural review to the Planning Commission. And so again, this is the second of the 3 meetings required by Measure G. So some of the site plan revisions, just very quickly here, and the applicant has a presentation as well. He can talk in more detail about them, but we have some changes to the entry area that's shown on the left here. One of the comments was related to the play equipment. There's an area on the central paseo that's dedicated for play equipment. It's on the right side of, let me see if I can circle it here. Well, maybe not. No, it's not working. But to the left of the second image is a new play area that's there, as well as some seating areas, and that's also still part of the stormwater treatment area. And then on the lower image, this is the balcony and overlook area. They've added pedestrian circulation to the left around the buildings back to the primary circulation area. So in addition, there were revisions to architecture in response to ARB comments. Much of the materials and colors remained unchanged. They were just reconfigured in different ways. And so there's some examples of some of the changes. Again, it's mostly where certain textures and where stone elements were provided and how those changes, but the Architectural Review Board was supportive of the changes. So this is a photo simulation from Crow Canyon Road looking back up. I'll give you an idea of the scale and massing in the context of the lower landscape areas. As you can see, there's also housing development off to the right of this image. So since the last meeting with the commission, we've prepared a draft mitigated negative declaration for the project. And so the outcome of that initial screening was that the project would not result in significant environmental impacts with the incorporation of mitigation measures for air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, geologic resources, hazards and hazardous material, hydrology, water quality, noise, and tribal cultural resources. And so the document's up for a 30-day review period that will close on November 28th. So at this point, staff's recommendation is to receive the staff report, a presentation from the applicant, take public comments on the project and the mitigated negative declaration, provide comments to the applicant and staff, and then continue the hearing to December 6th, consistent with the Measure G requirements for the next public hearing. So I'm available for questions, or we could roll right into the applicants.
Why don't we go ahead and let the applicant speak, and then we'll take questions from
Sure.
commission.
Let me bring up his stuff. If you want to press that to advance, the one that's worn out.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Thank you, Lauren. Good evening again. My name is Garrett Hines, Vice President with TrueMark Homes, located a couple blocks away here. Is our headquarters. We've been developing residential communities, neighborhoods, and homes in California for over 3 decades. And we're proud of what we do. With me tonight is my design team, KTGY Architects, world-class architects, Rusty with David Gates Associates Landscape Architects, and McKay and Somp Civil Engineers, to try to answer any questions you may have moving forward. Lauren covered a lot of the changes, and I just want to touch on a little bit more that the Architectural Review Board gave us 19 specific comments regarding site circulation architecture. I felt we hit all 19 of those. You reiterated many of them, and thus we received the recommendation to move ahead. The comments included, like in this lower left corner, let me get my glasses on. Buildings 7 and 8, they made sure we had the circulation come around those buildings to get to the main overlook area. And on the site right now, I'm sure you've driven back there, there's a wonderful old overlook that was there that we're trying to recreate to kind of pay respect to how the site was. And it's a beautiful spot for these future residents, if approved, to enjoy. The other big change on the site plan was there was a comment made that the tot lot at the old tot lot location right in the center of the green belt was too small. We reached out to the school district to get understanding of the kids that they expect generated from this neighborhood. These 61 townhomes, they anticipate 10 K through 5 children, 10 middle school and 12 high school. And so granted, there will be some younger than kindergarten students as well, but we thought if we could target this tot lot, and I have a blow up in a minute, to focus on ages 3 through 7, that would be appropriate for this kind of neighborhood, as the older kids tend to want to be somewhere else anyway. This tot lot is now up to about 600 square feet. So that's the size of a 3-car garage, which we think is adequate. A comment that Commissioner Marks made at the last hearing was, let's remove 2 units and see if we can make it even better. And we studied it. We looked at removing a unit from building 3 or building 6 or every building. Where could we take a unit out? And we never felt like it really benefited the community or the greater good of needing housing at this time. So we did not choose to do that. It's up for discussion still. Another comment that came from Commissioner Kuznick was explore ADUs, which is a great comment. And we are adding ADUs in most communities, but they're larger homes. These are smaller homes for smaller first-time buyers. For me to add ADUs, I'd be compromising these 3-bedroom units. I'd have to have 2-bedroom units and then ADUs. We didn't think that would really fit the marketplace at that time. So that's why we didn't move forward with that. But I think we've hit 95% of the comments that already came through. Architecturally, again, I have David with KTGY Architects. I can get into the details, but the gist that we heard and we reacted to were, comments such as differentiate the units better, less choppy, add stone to the pedestrian areas, add brackets and corbels and other details. And it might be hard to see here, but I hope you had a chance to look that we did apply those, and Architectural Review Board thought that we did a good job. And just real quickly, and again, I can come back to any of this. I want to get to your comments and public comments. Here's a blow up on the far left upper image of how the tot lot is kind of centered with a seat wall. And it integrates into this landscaped area with a central bridge area and seating areas. Again, the overlook area, we added the pedestrian connection and some other bench elements. And there you get some character imagery. I know Rusty did spend more time improving the drought tolerant plant concepts and also our storm treatment areas. And we played up the entry. There were comments about trying to slow traffic. So we created bulbs and rumble strips and other things that'll add, hopefully slow down traffic through the neighborhood. And again, it is a 3-story structure on Deerwood, but we think it adds to the character of the neighborhood. And here's a rendering of the overlook. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions with my team. But again, I want to get to your comments and hear the public.
Okay, so are there any comments for the applicant or for Lauren? And then we'll go to public comment, then we'll make our commission comments. So at this time, questions for Mr. Marks?
I have one question, and that is, I recall at the last meeting, I had suggested that entry signage was needed, and I didn't think I saw it on the plan. Are you intending to include entry signage? The reason I ask is that site comes up on you rather quickly when you're driving down that street. And in my experience, people may know the speed limit, but they don't really pay a whole lot of attention to it, so that you could easily go by it. So I'm wondering, is entry signage somewhere in the mix?
It's not on my radar at the moment, but it can be. I appreciate your comment about it being more of a moniker for that corner. And so we were happy to explore that. I prefer not to name neighborhoods and to keep them low key and blend in, but I'm happy to explore that for this. Yes.
Okay. That's my only question right now.
Commissioner Kuznick.
Thank you. And especially in reference to the slide that's still up there. Could you give us an idea of, because the project says there's going to be a glass wall. I'm assuming it's safety glass, but how tall that's going to be? Because
be required to be 42 inches. It could be higher if it was felt more appropriate.
Well, I have two concerns. One is if I'm down there with a child who thinks it would be really great to throw his very favorite toy over. Anybody who's had a kid knows what's going to happen next. And or smokers, because I know you've identified a fire zone, but that would look like a really attractive spot to go ding, and then we're off to the wildfire races.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. I don't have a mitigation off the top of my head, but we did anticipate a no climb 42-inch rail. There is a ladder provided for access down there. If some favorite ball or toy got thrown over, it would be accessible. And again, yeah, we do have a 30-foot strict fire buffer, then a 100-foot less restrictive buffer.
That's okay. I mean, that I appreciate it. I just wanted to.
Yeah.
I had just a couple of questions that I drew looking over your site planning sheets.
Okay.
The first question is, and you don't have to probably look at the sheets to answer them, but I'm going to reference them anyway. On sheet TM4, this is sort of the site plan for the entire project. There's only one ingress and egress into the project. Have you talked to the fire district whether they consider that one entrance and exit acceptable?
Absolutely. We always go to the fire department early and they helped us redesign the site to have the loop and it was found acceptable.
Okay, next question. On sheet A 3.0.1, there are depictions of the roofs. And my question is, are the roofs usable by the owners?
No. We will have solar panels and those will be accessible for the CCNRs, through the CCNRs and the HOA to access the roof for solar and repairs.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have two questions on sheet A 5.0.0. They seem to show a 2-inch space between units. Why?
It's a code issue, David. You can talk about it. It's just a code issue of, just an airspace between units. It's required.
Okay. And last question is on the same sheet. There are areas designated in the garage. They're referred to as T as in Tom, C as in Charlie, and R as in Ralph. What do they represent?
Trash cans? Yeah, trash, compact or compost and recycling.
Okay. See, that was easy. All right, that's the questions I have. Oh, I had one for Lauren. On the, this is a Measure G issue because we're changing the zoning on the general plan. So this is the second of our meetings?
Correct.
And how many have been attributable to the city council?
None yet.
Okay, so we'll have a couple, okay, so we're looking at sometime next year to have gone through the Measure G like we did for El Nido and also BR6, and to come back and do the application.
We will complete the legislative act with the city council and then come back for final action on the entitlement.
Okay, thank you. I thought that was the case, but I just want to double check. Thank you.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and open public comment?
2 late communication items were received from the city of San Ramon, Deerwood Ridge residents, and Robert Klinger, and are part of the public record and were provided to the commission prior to the meeting. We do have 1 speaker card as well as hands raised.
Okay, why don't we take the speaker card?
Robert Klinger.
Good evening. My name is Robert Klinger and I'm a resident of San Ramon. I just wanted to comment on the Planning Commission. I feel it's an honor for me to appear before you folks. I was in 2002 as a resident of San Ramon over someplace, and there was a guy, Eric Wallace, was writing the city charter and the first general plan. We worked until 4 o'clock in the morning. So I have an early introduction as to what you folks do. And I appreciate, from the bottom of my heart, all the hard work that you put in. You don't probably get thanked that much from a lot of folks, but every time I speak to the residents and we have discussions, I mentioned we're fortunate to have so many good officials, smart officials, and people that have our best interests. And so that's my preliminary comment. Thank you. These folks here had a meeting in August. I went over there and so I could look at all this stuff and provide comments. And a lot of these comments I have are the same ones that I gave to them. So I wrote this stuff out and I'll go over it pretty quickly. This is things that you should know about, and some of you folks will probably try to make corrections and try to resolve these problems or mitigate this. And they may, on hearing these comments, they may also feel it's appropriate. Deerwood Drive, people drive too fast. It's supposed to be 35 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. People do 45 miles an hour. They speed, and that's been documented. So a couple times a year, we have people come out and do the tests, and it's very fast. I have a picture here of Deerwood Drive, right where this development is, and there's a sharp curve. So what the problem is they have the sidewalk too close to Deerwood Drive. There's a sharp curve, and cars come around there very fast. So that's an accident waiting to happen. I don't know exactly how you fix that. But there's probably a lot of ways you can mitigate it. It's an item of concern. this neighborhood has changed. Our neighborhoods have changed a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. There's 35 new families. There's about 50 new kids. So this is the third generation since I've been there. You see the little ones now, they're all gone to college and they're gone married and they've all left. But now we got this generation now, all little ones, and they're so important to the community. And they don't have an interest. I mean, they don't have an understanding of how dangerous it is. So how that sidewalk is, it's not safe. Item number 1. So it says on there, construction trailer, construction worker parking area and construction staging area will be located on the project site. So that's a huge deal and it's very important. And since they put that in this thing, and they put this in as a document, I expect that they do that. You know, we've had experience with FREA for the last 10 years. And when people are supposed to do stuff in particular, they're supposed to have their cars and their trucks there and they're supposed to show up on time. They almost never do it. So there are people like myself, and you folks probably know Paul Reed. We monitor that really closely. If they say they're going to do something, then they should do it. So just wanted to point that out. The environmental impacts, it's called aesthetics. Most of the comments from the local neighborhood has to do with, we have 2-story, our homes are 2-story, they're single family homes. All of a sudden we have this thing coming across the street. And in terms of aesthetics, it doesn't sort of fit in because it's 3-story. So you have a situation where you go down and so all the houses sort of fit together. And then all of a sudden you have this area and it's 3-story homes. They're very, very nice looking, but I don't know if they fit in it in terms of aesthetics. So I think
I'm
there's,
gonna have to ask you to pick the next favorite one here, you know.
I'm almost out of time.
Well, you're over by a minute already. Yeah.
I talk too much.
Well, you
So
think this for
I'll
too
send
long.
this thing
Yeah.
to the planning commission. and
We
you
do,
can look
by the way, I just want to make it clear, we do have the copy of the memo, so
You do
we
have
all
it,
have it, we all have
okay.
it, we're given that.
So I will
thank you.
go to the last item of importance and thank you. So when, again, on a safety factor, on Deerwood Drive and Claremont Crest Court, they say the residents of Trumark will have access to the nearest parks. So they have to come out, and they have to go to the parks. In order to get to the Preserve Park up the hill, they have to cross the street. There's no crosswalks there. There are no stop signs there. They have to walk up Claremont Crest Court and then they have to circle over. It's about a half-mile walk. So in terms of transportation and circulation, in order to be safe, in order to have these persons have access to that park, you have to have stop signs there and you have to have a crosswalk. As part of that thing too is that I have mentioned to Trumark when we talk to them that we always run into the problems where personal vehicles are spread out through all the communities. So every time you have a new apartment complex or a new neighborhood, people don't park in their garage and they don't park in their own neighborhood. So I want the planning commission, the city council to understand that we have no extra space to accommodate their cars. And it's something that we have to take seriously. You have to take seriously and the builder should take seriously.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you very much.
Call in user 1.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to say that I'm very familiar with this kind of development because this reminds me of a townhome project on Ivy Hill Way that is also 3 stories. And because I'm familiar with these kind of developments in San Ramon, I want to point out that they are actually very efficiently designed. So from that perspective, I'm very supportive of this kind of plan, as well as this developer. I recall hearing at the architectural committee, this developer was very respectful and receptive to our architectural committee's suggestions. So I have good impression of this builder. What I would like to put in a word for future owners of this development are as following, which I would like the developer to please disclose to the public the management company that they will be picking for this development, as well as how many board of members, BODs, will be managing this community. I'm hoping that it will not be a 3, or even 5 kind of board of directors, because I know a lot of these houses are bought up by rich overseas immigrants, and they tend to buy in bulk. For example, I know that certain buildings can be scooped up like in seconds because they are friends and affiliates. And so then it's kind of interesting that even though there's like 8 buildings here, or 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 buildings here, you can see them as sort of like different countries, if you will, in this development within San Ramon, and that you guys would have no power to govern, and this area would be completely like a foreign land. So I really would like the developer to please keep that in mind in your CCNRs, that you must, to protect those people who are Americans, who are English speakers, that you need to ensure, once you leave, the community is able to elect competent board of directors who can continue to regulate this community to the expectation and standard that is worthy of the city of San Ramon. So I would ask you to be extremely careful in how you word the qualifications of your board of directors, as well as you need to pick good management companies who sometimes are really at the mercy of a lot of the foreign buyers that you sold these homes to. So I mean, like, if you can please put in some attention in those areas, I would really appreciate your help to keep San Ramon a high quality American city. Furthermore, I just have some pointers.
Time is up, caller.
In terms of corners, for people's safety.
Thank you for your comments tonight. We'll go ahead and move on. Next speaker.
There are no more speakers at this time.
Okay, then I'll go ahead and close public comment and turn to the commissioners for comments, direction. And again, there's no action tonight, and we will continue the Measure G part of this to the next meeting, but both the applicant and staff are here to listen. So with that, commissioner comments?
I'm just going to say, and I think I said this last time, I'm really pleased to see that these do represent starter homes. The square footage, I really like that, and kudos, and keep it up.
I don't have any other questions. And the only comment I would make is, unless someone else has some further discussion, to move. You do? Okay.
Sorry about that. I thought you were actually going to make some comments. In the September 21st, 2021 set of information that we received, there was a comment from the fire department that said the project does not meet requirements for dead end fire apparatus access road per CFC D103, et cetera, et cetera. What I'm getting to is, I would like to see will serve letters. I would like to see a will serve letter from the fire department. I would like to see a will serve letter from East Bay Mud and from Central Sanitary District. We typically get those. And even upon reading what was in the environmental impact report, or I should say the MND, it didn't sound like anyone had spoken to anyone at East Bay Mud. It was a review of the facilities, how water would be transported and carried through the site. And there was reference to a 2020 plan. But in light of the drought that we're in right now and people's heightened concern about water, I would like there to be will serve letters from at least those 3 agencies and certainly from the police department. I don't have a concern about the road the way we did in the first go around. I do believe the loop will work. But my own experience with fire apparatus facilities backing up on a long street is when you don't have the right kind of backup, expect the fire crew to show up in your office and find out what the hell are you doing these days and why aren't you coming up with a road that works for us. I want to be sure about that. I also believe that there needs to be a condition of approval that responds to the heightened concern about wildfires that this 1.6 acres does potentially pose to the residents of that project and in other areas. Yep, on page 114 of the initial study mitigated negative deck, it says that the homeowner shall maintain the 1.65 acres sloped area free of flammable materials and fuels within it or within 100 feet of the rear of the developed portion of the overall project. I think that's fine. But my experience is that homeowners associations don't always do what they are supposed to do, either for financial reasons or the homeowners association hires a firm and they don't really pay a lot of attention to conditions of approval. Therefore, I think at some point I would like to see staff develop a condition of approval to be attached to this project that says annually the homeowners association shall make arrangements for an inspection of the 1.65 acre sloped area by the San Ramon Valley Fire Protection District. I think that's the only way to ensure that the area is kept free of fuels and it happens on a regular basis. And that's something that, yes, we will have a mitigation monitoring program for all of the environmental conditions. But again, homeowners associations don't typically have a mitigation monitoring expert on their staff. If we're lucky, they have the conditions of approval and they'll know to arrange the inspection by the fire department. I also think that there ought to be something that notifies the fire department upon approval of this project, if it's approved, that we want them to inspect the area annually. Fire risk is a real concern in that area. And now that you have people living there, particularly students, high school students, the risk is, I think, a little bit greater. And so we need to keep that area clean. And again, I'm not looking for a fancy name for an entry sign, you know, Deerwood Acres or something like that. But something that announces entry, I think, is important, more than just enhanced paving, which I think is important. But you need to give people who are visiting or just driving by a sense that there's a residential project there. Those are my comments.
I only had one comment / question. You know, we heard tonight, as well as some of written, that traffic on Deerwood and whether a crosswalk's needed or a stop sign. Perhaps at the next meeting, the traffic engineer could comment on Deerwood traffic safety. And that's the only thing I would offer up as a suggestion based on public comment we've heard. And at that point, Commissioner Wallace, you could finish your sentence from before.
Well, thank you. I want to note with respect to Commissioner Mark's comments about the fire inspections. As I recall, didn't we permit a big fire facility right across the street? Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. Okay. All right. I would move a motion. The Planning Commission to continue the hearing on this application to December 6, 2022.
Okay. Press your green button before someone else does.
I would second.
Okay.
With the comment also that I forgot to add, I think this is a nicely done project.
Yeah. I should make the same comment. Not only is it nice, I do appreciate that there are true affordable units coming out of this project, not junior ADUs, not fees, but true affordable. And I think that's a really good accomplishment. So I want to echo the thank you on that. Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. And now we're waiting to vote. Okay, so the motion passes 4-0-0 and 1 no vote. Thank you very much. And thank you again for waiting out the night with us,
I want to point out something that the applicant did early on that was unusual and very much appreciated. You asked us when we were at a concept review meeting, what kind of architecture are you interested in? What kind do you think works? And you took it to heart. That's pretty rare. And I want to thank you for that. It saved a lot of hassle in terms of arguing about architecture. And I think it's just shows a willingness to work with a city that increasingly I find to be not so prevalent.
Okay. My agenda. Okay, at this point, we'll go back to part 2 of agenda item 12. Commissioner liaison reports or interest items. Does anybody have any liaison reports to share? Mr. Mills? Okay, I do. Last week, the ARB did meet at our direction to discuss the NITO project. So that was an out of cycle meeting on their part, and they did meet last Wednesday to discuss that. So the Architecture Review Board did vote to send it on back to us. So we will see that very soon. Maybe we'll hear about that in the next 10 or 20 seconds when. So with that, Lauren and or Debbie.
Right, so we're in a tiny bit of flux, but there are things pending. As we mentioned, November 15th, we're sort of saving for a joint meeting if we need it. Then there were the items that were raised as well. We are looking into a potential special meeting for the El Nido project. As you recall, the commission was open to accelerating that project, trying to get it through the process. So we're trying to coordinate that to see if it works. In addition, as you know, you continued this item to or the 2481 Deerwood to December 6th. And so we'll be bringing that back with the recommendations to the city council and also responding to comments received.
And hold all of January open for meetings if necessary. I remember writing that down.
Thank you. We'll appreciate that for the housing element update.
Yes,
Get it
okay.
done.
Okay, with nothing else from anybody at this point, we can go ahead and adjourn at 10:15. Thank you all.